All right, folks, we'll go ahead and get started real quick since we don't have a whole lot of time. Go ahead and get it turned over to Robin Bratzer from the city of Eureka. They're going to go ahead and do a presentation on SB 1383 for us and kind of talk about how that's going to be impacting us, impacting local business in the community, and what we need to be looking at doing. So Robin, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Donna's going to start real quick.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Welcome, everyone. My name is Donna Wood. I'm the Community Services Director for the City of Eureka. Our department oversees many different city functions from the harbor, marina, waterfront trail, parks, recreation, the Sequoia Park Zoo. Among all of these services, many might be surprised that we also oversee waste services for the city. While to date, it's included providing curbside trash and recycling service to all residents and businesses through a franchise contract, annual reporting to the state, and implementing state mandates like mandatory commercial recycling. Today's topic is SB 1383, and it's being called the largest change to waste and recycling industries in 30 years, and it's affecting everyone: residents, businesses, government, haulers, processors, and food rescue organizations. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Robin to provide a little more insight about all the work that's gone into the planning process to date. Robin.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donna. So hello, everyone. I'm Robin Prasker, City of Eureka Environmental Project Manager, and I'm going to be the lead on helping implement these requirements for our city. And I want to provide an overview of what we've done to date, and then we'll jump into what's coming. So SB 1383 is a state bill passed by the state legislature in 2016, and it's an effort to combat climate change. And even though the bill was passed all the way back then, CalRecycle is the state agency who's implementing the bill, and they had to craft the official rulemaking, which includes all the details of how and what will be required. And this is what we're all sorting through right now. This was not complete until late 2019. And as these rules became available, COVID hit, and many of our public services shut down to essential functions. But pretty quickly after that, our regional group, known as the Solid Waste Local Task Force, also known as the LTF, it's a regional group of all cities in the county who work on waste management together. We didn't meet during 2020 due to COVID, but right when we resumed in early 2021, we decided to take a regional approach to the implementation of this mandate. We created an ad hoc committee who helped create a scope and RFP to hire a consultant. Since then, we've hired Edgar & Associates, who's here today. And we also received a one-year extension to delay these requirements until January 1st, 2023. In tandem with that, we've been working on the planning to implement all of the regulations, which actually amounts to over 20 separate requirements. I won't bore you with all the details, but I can assure you that we're definitely busy on this topic. With that, we will get into the elements of this mandate that affects your business, which is why we have our consultant here today, and which is why you're here today. So I'll go ahead and share screen and then hand over to Evan to present.
Well, thank you, Robin. It's great to be on here today. With me is Monica White, and she's our Director of Sustainability for Edgar Associates. And I'm proud to say that I now have an office in Eureka. One of my goals when I took the contract with Humboldt Waste Management Authority was to open up a local office, and I closed escrow last month at 10th and 1005 N Street. It's a 3-1 Craftsman. I'm going to turn into my office when I work in the North Coast. So I'm excited to be part of the Eureka business community. And I should get an application for the Chamber of Commerce soon. So thank you for having us. And if you go to the next slide, I give you a little background on where we're at and where we're going. So we had the first kickoff meeting, the first of the year back in January 6th and 7th. I came up, interviewed Recology, Humboldt Sanitation, worked with a lot of stakeholders at the city, recycling coordinators. And then we had a nice webcast on what is edible food recovery, and Monica will talk more about that. We had a first draft of this roadmap. And what this roadmap is how to comply with this. A lot of moving parts, as Robin pointed out. Every department's involved, from general services to Parks and Rec to Public Works to legal, and and it really ties back to the climate action plan. It's not another recycling bill; it's a climate action plan. So we met with a local task force on April 25th with the first draft of the roadmap, and we had a model ordinance and procurement webcast in May. And last night, I mean not last night, but on last month at May 12th, the Humboldt Waste Management Authority Board of Directors made a command decision to repurpose the Hawthorne Street transfer station, where they have the Eureka Recycling Center, for not for CRV, but mostly for e-waste, refrigerator, metals and stuff. They're looking for a relocation that has a lot better access, a lot better opportunities within the Humboldt County. They looked at a place up in Arcata last night on a board agenda for a possible relocation. But most importantly, the Hawthorne Street transfer station would be the hub to process organics, food waste and green waste, since it's already at a solid waste facilities permit. That was a command decision on May 12th to have infrastructure. The thing about SB 1383, there's not too much compost infrastructure. With regards to green waste, there's 8 little small green waste composters throughout Humboldt County. But really, when it comes to food waste, there's really no food waste compost capacity. So that's why having Hawthorne Street being a processing facility and transfer facility is so critical to comply with 1383. That's was a leadership decision in order to get substantial compliance with 1383. And I'm coming up there on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday next week to meet with Peter Fuller, the executive director, and we're going to devise a plan. How are we going to release a compliance roadmap? Now that we've gone internally with working all the local task force, the recycling coordinators, we got key decisions from the board of directors, is how does the authority want to get the public process involved with Zero Waste Humboldt, the Chamber of Commerce. This is our first release of a public meeting, so it's great to be here today to talk about the key components. So come Tuesday when I'm up there, and Wednesday when I'm up in Humboldt and Eureka, I'll be working on the best way to get public input, and then I'll be working with Robin and how to deploy this and get public input to this compliance roadmap. Next slide. And there's a lot of going on. We have to pass a model ordinance. One thing that CalRecycle did do is they used some of that surplus money to help out local government on this. This is an unfunded state mandate on local government, and it's basically on local government, and they can contract it out to the waste haulers, such as Recology, to implement a lot of this. But they got to pass an ordinance. You have to have an organics collection system. And right now on the supply chain, a lot of new trucks are 12 to 18 months out to order new trucks. So we have to put that into the schedule in order to have a collection with new trucks from Recology. We're looking at capacity with regards to having it at Hawthorne and where do we have food waste composting. A lot of education outreach, a lot of monitoring enforcement, contamination monitoring. There's a procurement requirement that the city got to buy back compost and mulch or bioenergy, have a paper recycle procurement, edible food and reporting. This is a huge lift. As Robin said, the biggest lift in 30 years. It took effect the first of the year, January 1st, 2022, but there was a mechanism to buy a year, a notice of intent to kind of phase this in. A lot happened the last couple of years with the pandemic, supply chain, a lot of challenges. CalRecycle recognized that to not only we bought a year, there was $58 million in grant money back to local government in order to implement it. So there's a lot of incentive programs from the state in order to fund compost capacity. So there's a lot of positive pushes now to make this happen. And this compliance roadmap is our way to get there. Next slide, please. With that, I kind of want to turn over to Monica. She's been working in a community with Abound, who's their edible food recovery contractor, and putting some of the plans together. So Monica, let me have you take it away from here.
Sure. So in addition to the edible food recovery stuff I do, which we're going to really touch on and then in a few slides down in the presentation, it's important to recognize that 1383 really casts a very wide net as far as who's covered. So the intention with the regulatory rulemaking process was to make sure that we were capturing all ends of the organic waste spectrum, from the point of generation, whether it's single family homes, multifamily homes, businesses, to how material is going to be processed, as Evan mentioned, through facilities, and then greening the development side of it. So you will see on this slide, collection services are required for single family, multifamily businesses. There's some small scale waivers that businesses can apply for, not really a lot of waivers for any kind of residential homes, including multifamily, which is very new for the solid waste industry. In addition to the collection requirements is how we're managing the waste, which we're going to talk about in the contamination side. So it's no longer just acceptable to have the 3 cans outside. There's requirements for cities to make sure that individuals are using those cans appropriately to make sure that we aren't contaminating the materials. So as Evan mentioned, edible food recovery, this is a brave new world for CalRecycle, who has been a solid waste entity. So we recognize that diverting organics to feed people is really the highest and best use of any type of food that's been grown and manufactured to feed someone. So businesses that meet specific definitions will be required to have food recovery programs, which will include a contract and some kind of relationship with a nonprofit. So as we speak, we're wrapping up what's called a capacity assessment for Humboldt County to say how many tier 1 and tier 2 businesses are there in the county, what nonprofits are available in the county, is there a shortfall between those existing nonprofit infrastructures, and where we need to bring the remaining tier 1 and tier 2 businesses, as they're defined, into a food recovery program. So this is something that's going to be a process that takes a lot of time. There's been a really strong volunteer group, businesses that are really like early actors within this, but this is a very exciting part of 1383 because it's a great way to provide a direct benefit back to the community and support those who are suffering from food insecurity. So in addition, there are requirements for developers within Humboldt County, and they are in the ordinances that have been passed or in the process of being passed that have to do with green building requirements and water conservation landscaping. So that is definitely something that businesses should be aware of. If there's any new builds, that there are new requirements within the ordinances per 1383. Next slide. So Evan, do you want me to take this one?
Well, a little bit about collection is that is the simplest way to comply with 1383 is having a 3-cart system. You know, it limits contamination, it's source separation, it's better for commodities, especially with export markets being tightened down by China about paper and plastics. You really got to have clean products. So Recology invented a 3-cart system down in San Francisco about 15 years ago, the Fantastic 3. So that's now state of the art statewide, and that's what we're promoting. There's other opportunities that other large urban communities do with a one bin, and it's called dirty Murphy and recycling. It's all commingled, and you throw a lot of technology at it, and that option is there, but it takes a lot more compliance. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more. There's a lot of commodities being contaminated. So I'm glad that the community has selected the 3-cart system. CalRecycle kind of promotes it in a way that it's the best compliance pathway. So it's great that we're planning for the 3-cart system. And back over to Monica.
Yeah, so as you can see, the 3 carts are also going to have specific color requirements and labeling requirements, which if they haven't been rolled out into your community will be over the next year. And in addition, where this is really important for the businesses within the city to understand is there are potential for waivers that can be approved by the city under very specific circumstances. So the de minimis, as it states, you would have to really show that you're producing less than 20 gallons of organic waste per week. So this would require a business to do a waste audit. So say you're an accounting firm with no on-site food facility, it's very likely that you're not going to have a lot of food material or organics that wouldn't belong in recycling, right? So paper, cardboard's all going to go in the recycling bin, but that green bin really isn't going to be filled with yard trimmings or food scraps. So there is an opportunity for those businesses to demonstrate to the city that you don't really need that extra service. In addition, there's physical space waivers that if they can demonstrate there's insufficient room for a third container, they can be granted a temporary space waiver. I do say temporary because CalRecycle does expect cities to work towards finding a solution for this, because they really want to try and drive these organic waste out of the MSW stream. So where we look at opportunities could be shared containers, if that might work. Looking at really small containers. I have some cities that are very urban that are looking at 36-gallon carts. Or if there's opportunities for like on-site composting so that we're just not putting those organics within the bin, those could be long-term solutions to space waivers that the city and your hauler could work with you directly on. And our favorite topic of all is really enforcement. So enforcement comes into 1383 in a couple different ways. So the city is really required to implement a program. And if CalRecycle finds that a city is not doing everything within their power to implement a program, the city is subject to fines that could amount up to $10,000 a day. So this is a big deal. It is, CalRecycle is allowing time, but they're very serious that these enforcement aspects on the city are very serious. So in turn, the city then has to look at mechanisms to get businesses to participate. And so that could come up through enforcement of non-compliance. So I'll divide that into two buckets. So non-compliance, either a business refuses to subscribe to service or can't demonstrate a waiver out of it. So you could get fined for that non-compliance, or contamination, which we're going to talk about in one of the next slides. So as I said, and CalRecycle really is here to work with us, and hopefully that's evident by delaying implementation by a year. These are things that likely they're going to come back and say, okay, with city, what are you doing to really get businesses to participate? And they're not going to begin enforcement against cities by 2025, but it is important for businesses to know that the city's pressure on you is probably going to ramp up if we're resistant in the next few years to taking on those extra services. So next slide. Okay, so as we stated, so this is in Humboldt County, we are doing a 3-cart collection program. It is all color coded. So this is a new standard we've set throughout the state. And it's equated really to the idea that if we drive anywhere in the United States, we know what a red light means, we know what a yellow light means, we know what a green light means. So the CalRecycle wanted to implement the same kind of visual branding of containers throughout the solid waste industry, where we know exactly, no matter what city you're in, if you're on vacation in Southern California, you know that the blue container is going to accept generally these type of materials. There should be a green container for food scraps and plant waste, and then really things that are truly landfilled, like these diapers or shoes or whatnot. So hopefully this is fairly straightforward. This is going to go across any of your carts or bins across your city. Next slide.
And how many tons are we talking about in the relative scale? Because the goal is to get 75% of all organics out of the landfill by 2025. And of course, 20% of the edible food recovery to feed hungry people by 2025. So currently, the Hawthorne Transfer Station takes about 18,000 tons per year of green waste. So that's going on now. It's been going on for a while, and then there's a contract with Mad River Hardwoods, or a West Green company, till 2027. So right now, all this clean green material goes over there. It gets processed and composted. Great program, and the goal is to keep all green waste in Humboldt County, and eventually keep all organics in Humboldt County for a circular economy. So that's what the roadmap is built upon, is to make sure this organic waste has a local home. But once you add food waste to green waste, it takes a different type of permit, and those permits are not yet in Humboldt County. It takes 2 to 3 years maybe to get something permitted with the best available control technology. So until that time, there may be a short-term contract to export the food waste to a permitted compost facility in Northern California. Right now, that same food waste is being exported to Dry Creek landfill within the garbage. So right now it's going to Oregon, all commingled with garbage. But once it's source separated out and it goes through the Hawthorne transfer station, then it can be transferred to a compost facility until when it's locally permitted. And we're talking about 18,700 tons a year of food waste from both the residential and the commercial sector. And this food waste and green waste, when it's in a landfill, it under those anaerobic conditions, it creates methane. And methane is a super pollutant or a short-lived climate pollutant. It's 86 times more powerful than CO2 over a 20-year period. So the whole reason we have 1383 is to divert organics out of the landfill. So we have to design programs. Once it's collected by your hauler, it's taken to Hawthorne, the program is about 18,700 tons by 2025. Plus, there's a lot of wood waste still within the waste stream. There's about, and this is based upon some local waste characterization studies, coupled with some statewide studies, and it's based upon a 2014 base year. You have to get 75% out by 2025. So there's about 6,800 tons of your wood waste still in the waste stream that would have to be diverted out. And the biggest thing that's emerging is compostable paper. And my firm, we're the registered lobbying firm for the California Compost Coalition. And we really want to make sure that what is compostable paper, we can compost it. And there's a lot of different things. So we get to work with your hauler, Recology, and whoever is a food waste composter to make sure things are truly compostable. It's not like, things aren't biodegradable plastics and all these packaging things we see out there. A lot of cases, they're not really compostable, so that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think, with the businesses and we roll out this community this program for the restaurants, is what is truly compostable and what can be put in the green bin. So that's a nice chunk of work there. If you look at all of that, the new tons we got to divert is about 37,000 new tons by 2025, on top of the 18,000 tons currently going on. So it's a lift. We're going to double the amount of organics that are being collected today over the next couple of years. So the program designed about 55,000 tons a year. So it is a big lift, and that's why we're spending the time now with the roadmap. And it's a mandate, not a goal. And the mandate is upon local government, and the local government can then delegate a lot of it to the hauler to implement. All right, next slide.
All right, so my favorite topic is edible food generators. So as I stated earlier, businesses are really going to be divided up into, let's say, 3 categories. So tier ones that are considered tier 1 that require implementation of food recovery programs as of January 1 of this year. Tier 2, which tend to be different types of businesses that maybe have more what we call prepared food that have to have programs in compliance by 2024. And then the third category are other businesses that aren't required to have compliance, that it's voluntary, right? Businesses could voluntarily donate edible food. So part of the edible food capacity report that we are going to be providing this month, it's hopefully going to be done in the next week or 2, is going to provide guidance to each city about how many generators they have that meet these definitions, tier 1 and tier 2, an assessment of businesses that already have programs, and if those programs are compliant. And what I mean by that is, in order to meet the requirements of 1383, each of these businesses have to have a contract in place with the nonprofit or the food recovery service that collects the food. So this is kind of like a lift that happens within this system to make sure that we are recording how much food is being donated, and then the nonprofits would report that the total amount of food collected to the city would report it up to CalRecycle, and that's how we're kind of full circle in compliance on this part of the regulation. So if more details about this are coming, so we will have a much better idea. And I believe actually within this city, we were able to contact all the tier 1 and tier 2 businesses that met these definitions and invite them to a workshop to discuss the specifics behind this part of the regulation in order to do training. So I will say that this is not considered a fourth bin, right? When we're talking about feeding people, there's a very big lift as far as food safety that goes with it. And it's really important that we bring generators in to the fold in a way that we're ensuring that food is kept within temperature at all points of the collection process. And so we look at this as a progressive goal to get through to demonstrate compliance to CalRecycle. So that's part of what the capacity report will really show is where we are now, what do we need to do to get where we need to go, short-term goals, long-term goals to meet the tier 2 compliance. So as I said, there are record-keeping mandates that go along with this. So part of the city's job is to make sure that someone is visiting these generators and checking that they have compliant programs, they have a contract on site, and they have some way to record how much food is being donated. Within Humboldt County, it seems like public health is going to take this role, which is phenomenal because public health is visiting these businesses anyhow. All of these businesses have food permits. So that is phenomenal. But happy to take questions on this because it always elicits a lot at the end. So next slide. So here is my my great graph. So you guys have an idea of how many generators we're talking about within the city. So of course in Eureka, being the largest city, we do have the most tier 1 and tier 2 generators. So, next slide. Yes, and this is the flyer we had. I will find out if it was recorded. I actually don't, it was, okay, I see Robin shaking your head. So I'm sure that can be made available to any businesses that want to see the discussion that happened. Mike from Abound was able to be there, and he is just the leading expert in this and working on regional programs that are not only compliant with 1383, but really trying to push the needle down on food insecurity within California, since it's that's an important issue for us to tackle. So, next slide. So generator desk review, I'll take a stab at this. So part of the city's requirements is going to be doing an annual review of all the businesses within the city to make sure that services are being implemented in compliance with 1383. So this is something that Recology might do, since I'm sure Recology is handling all the businesses. And so at least once a year, any business that is not in compliance would be identified through this desk review and contact the city or hauler would contact the business and say, hey, it appears you should be subscribing to 1383 and having a blue or green can. We're notifying you that you require compliance, and if, you know, and then whatever, if there's enforcement attached with that. So this is an example of a checklist so that businesses within the city can see the type of information that will be looked at. So it is going to be by business name, by service levels, flagging if those service levels seem inadequate. Have they received, and it's a minimum of an annual outreach. Very likely businesses are going to be talked to a lot more than that. Are they required to have edible food recovery program? Do they have self-haul? Are they claiming self-haul? And then if there's going to have to be on-site checks of that self-haul. So of course, if I'm saying, you know, Monica's whatever grocery store is self-hauling all its material back to its DC, I would expect that someone is going to come visit me and say, show me that you're still self-hauling, that you are exempt from having this extra container outside of your business. And you can see the food rescue contracts. So next slide. Evan, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, with the CalGreen Compost Coalition, we've been working with CalGreen and landscaping for years, and a lot of people already have that in the wheelhouse. But if you didn't have it, when the cities update the ordinances, you got to include CalGreen and the landscape ordinance. And what CalGreen does is that on the front side of it, you have to have recycle about 65% of all mixed construction and demolition debris, and you got to have a C&D ordinance. So basically, this is a way to get to mix C&D in order to get that material, and then you get a 65% recycling rate. And when a lot of people are LEED certified, when they build a facility, they got to have a lot of different recycled products within it, whether it be reused inert or concrete or mulches or compost. So it's a good way to close the loop locally. They call this a circular economy. And it's more than a buzzword. It's something that we've been doing for a long time. The solid waste and recycling industry has been on this for a while with regards to taking wasted resources, and instead of putting it in a landfill that causes methane, we can actually use it for products within the community. So that's what CalGreen does. And with regards to the landscaping, there is a procurement requirement on behalf of the city where the city's got to buy back compost or mulch, or it could be bioenergy. There's a lot of flexibility in what the city of Eureka can do, but the easiest is buying back compost and landscape. So with any export of food waste to a food waste compost facility, one of the things I'm going to hopefully have them do is back all the compost to Humboldt County. So if we're exporting food waste, we can haul back the compost because of the mandate that the city's got to buy back so much. And there's only limited use what the city could do on parks and rec. So we're looking at ways to have a brokering agreement whereby the city could broker it out to agriculture and take all that compost and sequester it within the ranch lands of Humboldt County in order to not only have better yields of the grasses, but also sequester the carbon and the erosion control. And it saves 20 to 30% water when you use compost. So these are ordinances that many people already had in place, but if you didn't, now it's required, and it's a tool to use compost and mulch locally as part of the community plans. Okay, Monica.
So as I said, it is acceptable for a business to meet the requirements of 1383 by demonstrating they're self-hauling their own material. So in this, the city would be asking the business to demonstrate, how they're self-hauling, where is it going, is the material being diverted, to make sure that material is not just being sent to landfill, but instead, being used for animal feed is a really common source of self-haul, or, self-hauling it to a compost facility, say if it's a landscaper who's managing green waste. So 1383 really did raise the bar on the demonstrating. As you can see, that a business would be required to show delivery receipts or weight tickets, and report the amount of cubic yards or tons that were sent to that final destination. And then it would be up to the city to sort of confirm the end put of that. So making sure that if a landscaper is reporting their self-hauling landscaped materials for 5 multifamily dwellings, that the city is going to that composter and confirming that that material did go there. So there are opportunities to maintain self-haul, which it can be a really common occurrence within cities, but there is a higher bar of reporting associated with it. Next slide. So outreach and education. As I said, outreach and education becomes a really important component for CalRecycle to measure compliance with 1383. So there is a mandate that at least annually a city is reaching out to businesses and letting them know that they must comply with 1383, or if they're out of compliance with 1383. But there's also additional requirements about the type of information that's on that outreach and education. So making sure that we are including types of materials that are really local to that collection stream, or contamination, typical contaminants found in that collection stream. So this is really interesting. I work with a lot of cities, and one city will have a lot of shoes and ag bags, and another city might have a lot of, like clothes, and another. So it does vary from place to place, sometimes street by street. So that outreach and education should be tailored towards that contamination, which of course makes it easier for any customer to easily identify what material should go where. In addition, it should be multilingual if there's a high density of other languages spoken within an area. So what's really important for businesses to realize, especially on the multifamily side, is that multifamily dwellings have a requirement to educate any new tenant on the requirement to divert materials appropriately within the 3 collection streams. So this is new. We had requirements in 1826 to have organic waste collected at multifamily dwellings, about 5 units or more. But really now the onus is going to be on the owner or the management company of that MFD to make sure they're doing tenant by tenant outreach and education. And then, as we said, there's going to be some triggers if the hauler identifies there's contamination within the collected containers. Then they would have to reach back out to that specific generator to say, hey, you put a shoes in your green waste bin, that can't go in there, it needs to go in the MSW. There could be triggers within finding components of that, which I think we're going to talk about on the next slide, but there's going to be a lot more consistent messaging about these 3 containers and how they should be used. Okay, next slide. Yes, I'm monitoring and record keeping. So as my beautiful bin pictures show, there is actually a lid lift requirement with 1383 or some kind of like photographic evidence of the materials within a collection container. And if those materials are meeting the contamination limits required by 1383. So this is going to be a lot more like face-to-face interaction between all of the different components of the solid waste industry, the generator, the hauler, and the city. So haulers do, or the city could go out and lift lids, and I look in the containers and say, hey, this recycling container is filled with food waste, or big black garbage bags, and that's not right. Containers would be tagged. Customers would be notified that you can't do that. Depending on how the city will be rolling out, I have some haulers that refuse to collect the containers if there's contamination and require them to be cleaned before they come back and collect it. There could be a ramp up period that customers would be notified and the containers would be collected as a courtesy. And then subsequently they wouldn't be collected or they would be charged for garbage. So there's a few different ways your city and your hauler may be choosing to implement this part. But this is, again, a way for CalRecycle to really look at the city's record keeping components and say, are you meeting the requirements of 1383? Show me these lid lifts, show me how many customers had contamination, show me that you outreach to them, or are you putting fines? And then the beauty of 1383 is all of this is checked on the back end of where the facility is. So a facility then has to show that if I am taking all of these recyclables from businesses in Eureka, that they as a whole don't exceed more than 10% contamination within that recyclable container. And if they do, there's various triggers that happen. So it's really important that businesses understand, like, this is very serious from sort of the ground up. And there's a lot of different steps within this to make sure that we're diverting waste and we are diverting it appropriately without contamination. Because as Evan said, the goal is really circular economy. And in order for us to get there, we have to make sure that the materials are clean and usable on the back end. And this is the best way to do it.
All right. So in summary, this is a climate change bill to get organics out of the landfill, but the co-benefit is feeding hungry people. That's our contract with authority, that's their biggest line item is edible food recovery. So that's the biggest rewards. So it's a great bill to implement, but it's so misunderstood a lot. It's so many people are involved. It's not just public works anymore. It's, from the food banks to the Parks and Rec to procurement. So there's a lot of not confusion at unrolling it, but it's tenuous in order to get this going. And I'm glad that we're able to work with the jurisdictions with the ordinance. We have a model ordinance out. We had a webcast on edible food, and I'm just looking forward to rolling this out. And when I come up on Tuesday, I'm meeting with the health department on how to get the Hawthorne Street facility permitted to start processing food waste. So a lot happened in the short time. As Robin said, the pandemic slowed everything down. We have supply chain issues that Recology's got to deal with on ordering bins and trucks. So we still got a lot of work to do, but I feel we're in a lot better place now, 5 months later, with having a hub to transfer and process food waste, and having the local task force and Robin's leadership herding the cats with all the different communities And we have a good forum with the local task force to unveil this plan. And we'll be working with Peter Fuller, the executive director, on how do we move forward together on a public outreach component of this plan. And we're open for another 15 minutes for any questions and discussions about it. A lot was said here today, but we're open to clarify any points that you may have.
Evan, what kind of feedback from our membership would be useful for you? How can we help you get some feedback and get information out?
Oh, great aspect. Zero Waste Humboldt has a lot of work. One thing we didn't want to do is recreate the wheel on anything. So, between what Recology offers with public outreach education and with Zero Waste Humboldt, so there's already a lot there. So we're just piggybacking and parlaying what we have of record. I guess a feedback, what I've been seeing is on everybody's agenda is a climate action plan. There's a climate action plan that it was a regional climate action plan that's making rounds around all the cities right now. And basically, it's a great climate action plan, has a lot of good things inside of there. And basically, 1383 is just implementing your climate action plan. So as the cities look at their climate action plans, think that the 1383 program is one of the components to implement climate action planning. So I guess to look at it through the climate change lens as you look at this, it is a mandate, it's unfunded. I guess one thing is trying to understand that there's a lot more work to recycle organics and bury it, and it will be a fee increase. What we're seeing statewide, an average about 18 to 20% on a residential rates going up because you're not landfilling it. It's a green economy is creating jobs, procurement, reusing it. It's a lot of work. So we're seeing about 18% fee increase on the residential rate and about 30% on a commercial rate. And those are statewide averages. So I guess is what we're trying to understand the program so that when the fee increases do come, they're not a price shock. It's something that is needed in order to implement the climate action plan within your community. With regards to the public rollout and how we're going to move forward, I'm working with Peter and Eric at the authority on Tuesday morning. We're sitting down on where do we want to go from here. Again, I have a policy briefing. There's a lot of ways to roll this out to the general public, and I'm really looking forward to how Peter and Eric would like to do that within the cities and the community.
Yeah, I think I would just add, Linda, on the flip side of things, instead of feedback from you guys, I think just kind of setting an expectation that there has been an attitude with some curbside customers that you can just toss something in a bin and that's it, and you don't think about it again. And unfortunately, that's been kind of an attitude that's gone on for a while. And I think now with SB 1383, the state's basically saying that's not acceptable anymore, and that the city has to come in as a strong hand to make sure that we're providing the resources and the education and the environment to make a change with that. So I would just kind of set that expectation. I think we're gonna have to take our curbside service more seriously, care a little bit more about what we're putting in there, and recognize that each and every one of us have a role in that, whether it's Recology, whether it's the city, whether it's the business or resident, we're all in it together in that aspect.
Robin, that is so true. And we experience in wishful recycling, and Linda sees it every day. Like, people can think they put anything in a blue bin, and we got burned when China came around and wanted to decrease contamination, and plus basal accord, you can't take mixed plastic overseas. So the lessons learned on the blue cart, we need to take to the green cart. The green cart, we can't have wishful composting. Any greenwash packaging with a biodegradable chasing arrows is not acceptable. I think that we have a very narrow list of what is truly compostable, because I represent over 30 permitted compost facilities in California, and we're the organic recyclers. We're certified organic compost, and that's really good for the nurseries, strawberry, cannabis, and grapes. We want a clean feedstock. We don't want to commingle. So one of the discipline things, Linda, I think we got to work on is really public outreach. What can you put in the green cart? It's not anything organic or anything they want to use an overflow to feel good, but we got to have a narrow list in order to make it truly compostable packaging And right now we have a statewide initiative right now that's going to come up in November about single-use plastic. And it's a big deal about, we don't want plastics in our compost, and we want to limit that. And plus, we sponsored a bill last year, Compost Coalition, AB 1201, to what is very compostable. So the biggest challenge for the cities and the haulers is to really define what can go inside the green cart. That is the biggest challenge.
And as businesses try to comply with this, I imagine, you know, especially with restaurants with to-go containers, there are a lot of people out there that push this greenwashed biodegradable plastic that's out there. It's sort of like someone calling you and wanting to ask you if you want your warranty renewed. It is, you know, there's been this industry that's blossomed around this that is, you know, basically they're full of it. And, you know, they're taking an opportunity to make some money off of people's ignorance on this. So, you know, that I think it'll be incumbent on a lot of the businesses to be more cognizant of what containers are actually compostable and which are not.
So true.
I think one of the other things to add into is to put words to currently in Eureka, up to 30% of what's going in our blue recycling bins are contamination, which is essentially garbage. So while we're trying to roll out a brand new organics program, which this region has never had, we also need to get that number down. So we all have a lot of work cut out for us as a community to make all of those changes as fast as reasonably possible. I think Evan did a good job sharing that CalRecycle is giving time. They want to work with us. We have a great relationship with them. So in a lot of ways, we have more support than we might have ever had on this topic, but it's also time to make a positive change.
And there's a good parlay with the circular economy on this food waste. One of the things we're going to be permitting at Hawthorne Street is the ability to have food waste processing equipment to clean it up, to make a slurry. A lot of this post-consumer food waste is 30% contamination, a lot of plastic, corks and forks, and it's a lot of stuff. So by having the ability to make a slurry, we can have the ability to keep things local. One aspect of making a slurry, we can take it to a wastewater treatment plant with co-digestion and make energy. That's one option we looked at the authority looked at years ago. Another option is that Recology and is working on with Chapeau Farms is maybe making fish food for Nordic farms. So by taking a slurry and take it to what we call soldier flight technologies, you get a maggot, and then you can actually screen that out, and that's great fish food. So with Nordic coming to town and all this food waste available, we can keep it all in Humboldt County with a circular economy by feeding your food waste to fish, to the fish farm. That's a great example. So we're looking at things like that in order to keep all food waste within Humboldt County in order to create products for a circular economy.
And I'll just jump in really quickly to support Robin's point on the blue container. So there's hopefully it's not a misconception within this region, but I've seen it in other cities that we're really only focused on green. So that's not the case. So 1383 covers all organic materials, which includes cardboards and papers, which are materials that would end up in your blue can. So those contamination thresholds extend to contamination within recycling containers. And that's a way for businesses to understand that, I mean, as Robin said, this is a landmark change within the solid waste industry, that we're really going to be focusing on these two colored containers to drive contamination down and make sure products are usable. So this is an opportunity for everyone to sort of step up their game and reduce contamination within the blue. And as Evan's sort of touching on, I mean, there's almost more tolerance sometimes in these organics materials for contamination than there are in the blue, because of the way the markets have changed, and because as soon as you put something wet in that container, it really spoils so much of the recycled commodities. So that's something for businesses to be aware of, is that it is not just about the green. The blue is going to be checked out. Very likely there's going to be cart tagging associated with that. And it's really important that if businesses truly want to recycle and make a difference here, that we do consider those traditional recyclable materials and the contamination within that cart.
I know we have a few minutes left, and before we see if there's any more questions, I just want to circle back to highlight like the major takeaways of what business owners should be thinking about. And that one is going to be, when we roll out a curbside organics program, you will need to subscribe, assuming that you don't fall under any sort of waiver, which will be minimal. And how the region is handling that is we're working as fast as we can to develop a program that will at first export the material out to an existing facility outside of the region. In tandem, we're trying to site a facility in the region that we're for a few years out from having happen. So food waste will be exported in the beginning. As we set a facility, then we'll process it within the county. The second thing would be all the bins that your business will have, making sure your staff, or if it's a multifamily complex, that the residents are using it correctly. And then if you say have a restaurant and you have customers bust their own table and you provide a garbage can, you have to provide all 3 cans for the public to use, and they need to be clearly labeled. And we'll be helping provide signage, model signage you can use for those bins. But definitely think about that if you are a food business that has your customers use bins themselves. And then the contamination monitoring and education, knowing that we and haulers will be reaching out if there's issues and we'll work with you to fix them. So that should be the major takeaways for business owners, along with donating edible food if you fell into tier 1 or tier 2. And we have a recorded workshop on those requirements that we can send over to you guys. So any other closing questions with our last 5 minutes?
I think y'all pretty well answered all the questions. Thank you guys very much for participating today in our Government Affairs Committee meeting, and just for all the insights and the takeaways. And it's been very informative. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. Edgar Associates looks forward to joining the Greater Eureka Chamber of Commerce. So I get an application from Robin. I'll be signing up in order to be part of the community.
All right. Sounds like a plan. We appreciate that.
And
Thank you guys so much.
we will get the information out. You have things you want to get out to the business community, please send it our way. We'll keep the information flowing on this because it's going to be more important as time moves on here.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Monica.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.